timer. So anyway, let's hear it for Ryan, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Like you said, my name is Ryan. I do have these slides linked. It's a very undeveloped GitHub currently, but I'm working on that as it kind of goes here. It'll hopefully be like a full course. And yeah, like I said, the whole thing is a series on, I am focusing on mostly on Active Directory, but after some feedback, I found out I might as well start from the very beginning of what even is the infrastructure to set up with, how can you even start to get into someone's network from the outside. And so the first talk, which is also in the GitHub, does cover kind of it's more like the theory of what, as a pen tester, I'm really trying to do. I know a lot of people kind of think it's just throwing out exploits and using a bunch of fancy scripts that you write up, and it's a lot simpler than that for a lot of the time. And I prefer things to be a lot simpler because it means I have to do a little bit less work and I can do it a lot quicker, so it's nice. But today we'll be talking about the infrastructure for your command and control and kind of just how to set that up and where you can set that up. And then we'll cover a few of the initial footholds and how kind of easy that is, especially once your organization is over a couple hundred people. It just gets easier and easier the more kind of target space you have. So we'll do a quick review. If you missed the last one, and I'll try to get through that quickly because I have a little bit maybe more to talk about than I should. And then we'll do C2 setups and some initial footholds. So last time I talked about the whole basic theory. So we have you start out and you get some credentials. You try to see if those are high privilege credentials or not. If they're not, you want to find out where those credentials can go. And then you're going to migrate to other hosts that have more credentials for you to steal, and you'll kind of cycle through that and eventually be able to take over the whole domain from the inside. And we kind of talked about this, the whole attack path is if once I get Bob's creds and I have a computer I can go to, there's maybe more people on those computers that I can steal creds from, and you spread this out until eventually you get somewhere where you've got a domain admin. But first we need to actually get Bob's credentials in the first place. And before that even, we need somewhere to be able to send our shells and talk to the target space. So we've got command and control. Command and control, there's kind of two sides. I mean, I know it's command and control, but the server itself does command and control, and then you need the actual web server itself sitting out somewhere. Because if you're at your house, you can't send a shell to your computer. Your router is going to block that. You need open ports on the internet, right? Some design considerations, think up front, are do you need to be stealthy? That's kind of how complex does this infrastructure need to be? The skill of the target you're going after, are they going to be actually actively looking at your traffic and traffic inside and outside their network, and what are they going to be looking for? How long are you going to be on this attack? Once we kind of get into it, some of the longer attacks, you might want to have backup kind of servers where you might send one shell but never talk to it. It only checks in every 3 weeks or something because you want that guy to stay super hidden just in case your main guy gets burned. And then what's in scope, you don't need to set up all the servers for different phishing attacks and things like that if you don't have to. So that kind of is in there. For us, and well, I guess for me, Kali Linux is kind of the go-to operating system I want running on my different servers. And then for the handlers that are going to catch things and send a lot of my traffic, we use Metasploit and PowerShell Empire. They're both free. There's some paid for ones that we can talk about too a little bit later. And then hosting, AWS and DigitalOcean are great. You can use your own home address, but you kind of have to set it up so that that'll work, and that's kind of different. It's much easier just to throw something up in the cloud that's already built, and you get some other benefits from that too. So a simple command setup, and this is the basics, right? You've got your command and control server, the internet is there, and your victim, right? And you just have a straight pipe straight from the victim through all the hops straight to your server, and then you are probably SSH'd into your attack server. I guess that could go directly to the attacker box if it wanted to, but for this we'll just stay there. So the attack host can really be anything. I prefer Kali, but anything that's got SSH, because we're going to be SSHing into our Kali instance. That's the actual holding our shells, where we're going to command everything from. And then the victim, these are not necessarily just users, these can be like web servers, just anything that's out there talking back to you. Setting this up in the cloud is actually really easy and quick, and I really bet if anyone wanted to follow along, they could almost keep up and do this. But AWS is like free infrastructure for attack servers kind of out there. You can actually use their micro instances and sign up for a free account and deploy this stuff. So I've got every step even in here. Like, this is after you sign up. This is kind of the dashboard you see. This is for a free account. And then you can launch a new instance. And nice enough is that Amazon actually includes Kali in one of their pre-distributed instances. So if you go to the marketplace on your instance, you can search for Kali and find Kali Linux in there and get going. You set up Kali to launch, and I chose the T2 Micro just because that one's free, unless I think you get over some amount of bandwidth, they might start charging you, but it's very less, like 10 cents or something, but this is just to get set up. It'll ask you to generate a new key pair. You'll create a new one, call it whatever you want. You save this back to your own computer. And then as soon as you launch it, it's going to tell you your public IP address that you now have. And there is your public DNS also, which is nice that if that root domain on there is amazonaws.com. And so that gets through some things just because it's hosted on Amazon. A lot of people trust Amazon traffic for some reason. So it already doesn't really look like a malicious box out there. As far as connecting to it, you basically are just going to SSH with that key that you downloaded straight to, and they start you off with this EC2 user to the IP. And it's as simple as that, and now you're logged in to your Kali box on the internet, just about ready to go. The only thing you have to do left is set up a security group. The security groups kind of control what can talk inbound and outbound to your AWS instance. And there's probably a lot more AWS can do that I just don't really mess with. This is maybe the worst way you would set this up, because I'm allowing in these steps just every port basically I want to be exposed to the internet to talk inbound and outbound. Because depending on the situations, you might not just need to talk over web ports, you might need some high-level port, or depending on what protocol you're messing with. Like, I just want everything to be able to talk to the internet. This is kind of just setting that up. You got a new rule, allow all TCP from any IP address. And when we get into the more advanced setups, you can actually restrict your IP addresses so that they're only coming from your target sources, and that way you kind of just protect your own infrastructure from other hackers, or like if blue teams are starting to actually dig in and look for stuff, they might be able to fingerprint you that way. But it really is as simple as, once you set that up, you can set up like Apache just to kind of test and hit your IP address that it gave you, and you've already got your whole command and control, like at least this basic server set up in the cloud, ready to go and catch shells from anywhere. All those steps are kind of just gathered there, but it's not that many steps to really just get yourself up out on the internet, and it's nothing to do with your own home, and you can SSH in from really anywhere to your now free sitting up command and control instance. And that's kind of just the most basic setup. Some better setups, and like depending on how stealthy you want to be and how quiet and sneaky and everything, you can kind of introduce domain redirectors. Domain redirectors are where if you want to go buy like domain names and then have those set up on your Amazon instances, basically the idea is that these things are burnable, we'll say. So if you do get caught, or you notice that all of a sudden none of your payloads start working because they found your reverse shells out there, and they're like, okay, we found this guy, we're going to block that IP, he can't get there anymore. And this is kind of the whole point of having those secondary guys set up. But you can just get rid of these things real quick, because all they are is just a domain that's sitting out there, a simple server that's port forwarding everything straight through to your real command and control. The idea here is that you don't have to, once you do set up like that Kali box, you might want to install a bunch of other tools to it, and you just don't have to keep on doing that every time you need to set up your C2. So you'll keep redirectors out in front, and these will kind of just mask your actual C2 in case it ever gets burned. Or even if you're using your home address for the actual command and control, you can just use these redirectors so they can get burned all the time, and you can just keep on setting those up real quick, Just change the domain you're shooting it to, and you're fine. Yeah, they're meant to be easy up, down, and just so you don't have to deal with all that. I think they call it like malleable C2 or something, but it's so it can just like quickly be changing domains, IPs, whatever. That stuff doesn't affect us as much. Now, if you really want to get crazy and move on up to the real stuff, like you get into these chained redirectors, because there's like some advanced blue team techniques that can kind of try to fingerprint where that traffic is coming from, even if it's going through multiple hops or if it's changing. The idea is here is that each one of like your actual command and controls is hosting something different. So like one might be for the phishing campaign, and one is like a different email server. One maybe is FTP. You have payload stagers. This is so that you can actually host payloads from different places. The idea here is that if you blend your traffic out amongst enough places, it just looks like normal. It's like really hard to determine where the actual like attack is coming or what you can block that will actually stop anything. Because anything you stop here, I can just switch over to a different one. And like you're gonna have your primary and secondary command and control. The idea is once you get kind of your first shell, and some people have different like ratios, but like 1 in 10 boxes you pop, you might send over to that secondary and set some really long duration like check-ins, so that just in case you do get your main one burned or figured out or blocked, you've got this backup that's still in there, but he's spending so little traffic, it's really hard to find him. There is a blog, Blue Screen of Jeff. It's Jeff, I don't even actually know his last name, but I think his like Twitter handle is Blue Screen of Jeff, so I consider everyone by their handles. He's got a full post, or quite a few of them, on like covert red team attack infrastructures, and just different levels of the setups depending on what your scenario is. And his main thing is that, yeah, you divide the servers by function. Don't overdo it, because it's really surprising how often that we can just use the same IP for the entire engagement and it never gets caught. And then maybe like 5 or 6 months later, we'll get a call of like, hey, you guys did a pen test for us. Is this your IP? And it's like they're just getting to figuring that stuff out. So it's not as like tough, and you don't have to be as sneaky as you might think you have to be before, because attribution is a really hard thing to do in big networks. I know that's like a big problem for blue teams, just because there's just so much traffic in a network all the time, and if you're using the right protocols as an attacker, you just look like normal traffic. And part of this whole series is getting at that, like, we're not using these crazy exploits and stuff, right? We're getting in as your normal users and then just looking like normal user traffic. And so I don't know how many people are really monitoring just their everyday users' traffic if they're just surfing the web and stuff. That's what all I'm trying to look like is. The counter ops, they get into some of the, you might figure out that they're like using like their mail server, like in phishing for example, like uses some really unique user agent header or something, and you could make sure you're mimicking all those things, and just more things you can do to kind of distract the blue teams from actually finding you and giving you more time on the inside. But once you get on the inside, and we'll see probably in the next talk, the actual like covering in the inside and lateral movement, that it goes pretty quick once they're inside. So it's tough for them to find you if you've got enough of this spread out and catch you in time that you can't make it just really, really hard to get rid of you. As an attacker, I guess I should say. The protocol choice does kind of matter too. He's got different tips for using whichever. Like we primarily use HTTPS because it's fairly simple, and a lot of times your appliances just assume stuff over 443, like they're not terminating and everything, they're not decrypting it, they're not looking at it. You can do this all over DNS requests back and forth. It's a lot slower, but it's doable. Domain fronting is a technique that's been kind of recently popularized, and somewhat you could say even setting up in AWS is domain fronting. But the whole point of domain fronting is the main one was using Google's app engine, where anyone can sign up and get a Google or yourappname.appspot.com, and it comes from like a trusted Google source. But those are actually the command and control redirectors So their app looks like it's going out to reach to Google, but I just redirect that request with my app to my actual C2. And that's kind of the domain fronting setup. Third-party command and control, these ones are like the really sneaky, tricky ones. I don't know if anyone saw, I think this summer there was kind of a big post about someone was running their command and control off Britney Spears' Instagram comments. And so they were using they would basically have random accounts posting to famous people's Instagram accounts with a comment that was actually some encoded command for their command and control servers for reaching out and just checking comments on those posts, looking for that. And that from a blue team is really hard to figure out that's what's going on. I don't even know how those guys actually even caught that, but it was a discovered thing. That's kind of the third party, using Twitter or some other means. I've seen even shells being caught and used in Slack. There's integrations now. I think even Empire has an actual module for it. But using just these third party apps that become trusted, and so the traffic just looks like it's very normal traffic, but they're actually talking to your C2 servers. You're just not even hosting your C2 anymore. So there's lots of design theories on all this. Cobalt Strike, Mudge has written quite a bit about it. They're really big into red teaming, the whole Cobalt Strike. That is a paid for product though. But they have their team servers and they have a bunch of different shared infrastructure. Black Hills wrote one up on just setting the same kind of thing up on DigitalOcean. But really in these cloud providers, it's fairly simple to set these things up quickly and then tear them down quickly so that you can just keep rebuilding them out whenever you need them. Ideally, a new one for each engagement, just so you don't cross-contaminate any data or anything. Or tools nowadays also will share, if they catch some malicious stuff on this network coming from these IPs, anyone that's part of that product will also get that protection. And so we'll just change every time so that even if one does get caught, it just doesn't matter anymore. And so yeah, the command and control choices, these are as far as just actually running your shells, which we'll get to eventually, but PowerShell Empire, Metasploit, JSRat is kind of a newer one where they're compiling everything using the .NET to JavaScript libraries that I won't get too much into that, but then there's there's a whole PowerShell C2, that's the whole thing's written in PowerShell. There's lots of free ones out there, so it's not any kid can just go out and start doing this without needing some nation state backing them. This is all just free stuff. There is paid ones. Cobalt Strike is actually got a lot of good features, which are nice. Canvas, Core Impact, I haven't actually used, but I hear a lot of people talk about. And then Metasploit Pro, there is a Pro version. I think that mostly adds a lot of their web attack stuff. I've never had a need for it, but it might offer some things I just don't know about. So now that you've got that Kali box set up, just to quickly set up your actual where you're going to catch the shells is I prefer PowerShell Empire, which is as simple as cloning their GitHub project, changing into that directory, and just running the install. And so the idea is that you can go back through these slides and actually launch all this stuff within a relatively short amount of time and have a full setup running. Once you kind of get Empire set up, you can launch it. It looks like this. I don't know if you can see that at all, but it's a little bit Metasploit-ish. It gets confusing switching back and forth between the two, but because of the command syntax, they for some reason, for a long time, were using the same syntax, and then they just decided we're different, so we're going to switch. But it's not too bad. Metasploit itself is built in by default to Kali. It's recommended that you kind of start up the database on the back end just to make searches quicker, but Metasploit's also a great tool. Some other notes on the command and control that we use, and that kind of comes in helpful, is when you have these things up running in the cloud or whatever, and say you want to change where you're coming from to even log into your C2, well, Screen or Tmux is a great application to be using, so that way you can run all these programs, but you don't have to stay connected to the box the whole time. It's fairly simple to use once you get it up and running. This is kind of an example coming from one of our attack boxes where at the bottom of the screen there you can see you'd see your source IP, what other windows you have open in Screen, and then any open ports you maybe have open. One good thing is not to leave a bunch of open ports, because that can kind of leave you more open to be getting caught kind of stuff. And you want to protect the data that you are stealing, because especially if you're doing a pen test for like work, like you don't want, if you're transferring all their passwords out, you don't really want to be doing that in plain text across the internet and exposing your clients to more kind of impact. And then we use Twofactor on all our SSH stuff. So we keep all our stuff up in the cloud, but then besides just SSH with keys, we have Twofactor set up, which you can easily set up with Google Authenticator. And you probably should do that on your internal SSH every appliance anyways. It's a little bit of a hassle if you have to log in all the time, I get that, but we'll see that like just Twofactor is really a pain to get past as a tester, and just so many people don't implement it. It's fantastic when they don't, because all I have to do is find those creds and then I'm in. So that was the setup, but like how do we actually get somebody, right? So we've got our hack command and control server set up. We've got Empire going. Some of these initial footholds, and I've kind of been harping on this through the last presentation too, it's just that like, it's not exploits. Yes, we do have to get in sometimes with exploits, but like, I'm gonna go with the easiest route first, right? And this isn't even like low-hanging fruit as far as like missing patches, which are an issue too, but it's mostly targeting your users. And the first thing we're gonna do is identify those users, which is a lot of times really simple. If your company has like an About Us page and links everyone's email address there, that's probably also their login. You know, so things like that people don't think about. They think they're kind of helping their customers, but really they're just exposing themselves more. You maybe want to just use like an info@your-company kind of thing. Have I Been Harvested it's a tool we developed at Depth. A guy, Brian Berg, one of my colleagues, I guess you call him, wrote this thing. And if you've heard of Have I Been Pwned, I think Troy Hunt is the guy. I hope that's the right guy. Yeah, you can basically like type in your email address and see if you ever got owned, right? And it'll tell you like, this is the breach you got found in or whatever. Well, Have I Been Harvested takes the idea of the harvester, which is a tool that goes out and you can type in a company and it'll try to scrape the web, like with Google searches or that company's domain, just looking for email addresses that match that top level domain. Have I Been Harvested, basically it runs them both. So I'll type in company.com and this will query all of the harvester stuff for email addresses and then take those email addresses and submit them to Have I Been Pwned to then get the results, which are like, and running this even on our own company, info@Depth Security, which is one of the ones listed on ours, was popped in some bit.ly email breach. And Have I Been Pwned will tell you like the name of the breach, what was released, the date of the disclosure, and then any references. The part I won't totally cover, and this is kind of some more output of this thing, so it gives you a little HTML file that shows the users that got owned and what kind of breaches they're in. Well, as an attacking group, we've been harvesting, so whenever we see one of those dumps come out that's got like 500,000 or 500 million sometimes users and email addresses, we'll go download them, we'll go add them to our database, and then ours will actually take those, the ones that we know we have popped, and if we have that domain dump, will give us passwords of all these users already. And there is a surprisingly large amount. I mean, like places like LinkedIn get breached. And you might think, well, LinkedIn got breached like in 2012, I think, is when it happened. And so those passwords are out of date. But a lot of those passwords are like summer 08. And so I can probably guess when they updated their password, it's now going to be summer 17, you know? And a neat one about the Adobe breach is it gives like the hints also were in the breach. And it'll even tell you like password is dog's name, and then you can kind of do more looking into someone about their public life that everyone likes to post everything about themselves online. So it's very easy to discover once we have those security questions how to get past that stuff. And this is all just free already on the internet. We're not doing really any hacking yet. These breaches can be found on like Pastebin, and there's different sites like I think like Leaked Source maybe. But people just gather these things, and even if they're all encrypted, they'll even have sites that everyone's working together, spreading out all the password hashes and trying to crack them all and put them in these giant databases that we can just search because we've been harvesting them for a while of just users and passwords. And so a lot of times we can even just start there with just typing in a domain in our database and just see all the different users we've already got passwords for. But we don't always need the passwords, because we're also just going to try guessing passwords in a bit. Linked int is another tool. This is part of MD6 Active Breach group they wrote. This has got it's pretty simple to install. You basically just need a LinkedIn API key. And it will search LinkedIn for that company and then try to discover all it can about all their employees. And so that's another way of getting all these usernames that we're going to use for our attacks in a bit. And it gets into a little bit of a creepy spot where you create a fake recruiter with like some cute girl or guy's picture on it and just ask everyone in the world to be friends with. But you can use that kind of an account, and attackers do, to then use that to like discover all your third-party connections. And what we're really trying to do is collect as many possible logins as we can to your company. Once we have all those logins, we're going to looking for different login points. And the main ones we're looking at here for like really just targeting Active Directory, because we want straight into AD, is going to be your VPN Gateways, because that is just like a front door right into your company if I can guess someone's password. And usually their usernames are going to be really close to that email address. And it's just like everyone signs up for so much stuff with their work accounts that it's bound to be caught in a breach from some little tiny third-party site you never thought would affect you. But password reuse is a real thing that a lot of people do, and so it's really easy just to try all those passwords once and you might just already have a password and ready to log in. Webmail is another big one where it's easy enough to find on most companies, because you can just type in like outlook.company.com, or their auto-discover address will kind of help you with that, or webmail.company.com. We also will look at Citrix, file shares, your SharePoints, things we can find that have like logins that are clearly going to be tied to AD or back to AD somehow. The next step then, once we have those users and emails, is to spray some weak passwords. And when I say weak passwords, it's really just spring 2018 would be like this current season. I'd probably still stick with like winter, because they maybe had to change their password recently. The typical ones like password 1, and you see those lists that come out. I know they just added a bunch to the sec list they talked about earlier, but it's crazy, I think, to like security people to think people would put that as their password, but I just can't tell you like how many times this gets us in so easily. And the problem is that it's really hard to detect from a defensive side, is because if we are aware of the account lockouts, and a lot of companies increase the defaults just because they don't want to have to deal with customer complaint tickets because they lock themselves out of their accounts again. We generally, I won't try 5 every 30 minutes, but maybe 1 or 2 every couple hours on your whole list, and you're just almost guaranteed to get someone's password, especially if you have a large enough company. If you've got over 1,000 email addresses, someone there for some reason chooses spring 2018. And by default, AD doesn't give you the best ways to even prevent your users from setting spring 2018. I think even with the advanced settings on, it's like capital, lowercase, and special characters. So spring 18 exclamation point gets past that, and that's all these users are going to try. So there's tools for doing this that are fairly simple too, which Burp is an easy one on at least like Outlook. There is some specific tools that even target Outlook itself to do the logins for you, but I kind of step through like literally every step that it takes. Is I'll go to your Outlook website. This one was nice enough to tell me to please sign in with this format, which said like company/username. One part about figuring it out is like sometimes your email addresses don't map directly to your usernames, but if your email is like ryan.preston, I can try rpreston or Ryan Preston is one word. Like there's a few things you can just do to guess that's probably likely. So we'll proxy this request in Burp. You basically capture that request and you send it to Intruder, which is also a free tool built into Burp. Simple to use. You don't have to have the paid for version to even use this. The sniper attack, basically all I'm going to target is I'm going to pick, in this example, like I picked fall 2017. That's the actual, like this is a post request happening. And the username is the only field I'm going to highlight, because that's the one I'm going to test my user list I gathered from those other tools. You go to the Intruder, you load up all your usernames, and you fire this thing off. And surprisingly, like in this example, 2 people had fall 2017 as their password. And it like every time blows my mind, like what year are we in? How is this still happening? But it definitely happens. One nice thing about Outlook that's a little known, I guess, feature, because Windows has lots of features, is that response times can be used to determine if you have a valid username or not. And so if you're trying to figure out their username convention, you can compare the response times to the password request to determine if it's a real username or not. When they respond right away with a failure, that means they had that user like in the worst, this is not a very technical description, but like they've got it in memory so it can quickly check and say, nope, that's not there, and push it back. If it is a username it doesn't already know, it's going to look in a couple different places, and so the responses end up taking longer. And so like this kind of example, just I'm highlighting the response times there, but all the valid ones have just like a 300 millisecond delay, and the invalid ones have a 3000 millisecond delay. So if you find a bunch of users, you can try a bunch of different forms of that one username, and then just based on the response times, determine if you've got valid users or not. From there, I guess you're really looking to see in Intruder, I guess, if it redirects. Outlook's general kind of thing is to redirect you a couple times, then you get to your actual like Outlook inbox. That's kind of what you're looking for, is those redirects, and the ones that just fail and bring you to the same page didn't work. So as far as like getting that initial shell, once we've discovered these passwords, and again, like this is all just, I know it seems like it's like so simple, but it really is that easy. If they've got a VPN endpoint, you're basically already in. Another feature of Windows is that by default, every domain user, no special privileges, can join up to 10 machines to the domain. So if I've got VPN access and I'm VPNing from my Kali box, I can launch a VM, connect that, and then use my user's credentials that I do have, and I've connected now I have a domain joined Windows box inside the domain. And unless that person's already joined their 10, I can get in. And that one's like a tricky, I don't even know why they do that by default, by domain users. It's even hard to find the actual like attribute, because you actually have to look at your domain level, the domain context name. If you like right click on check on the domains property, there's a MS machine account quota that's in there that'll be 10. And so like you won't even see it on a normal user's profile, but it's actually on your domain level profile if you are guys going to like look at this and maybe change it so that just privileged users can or whatever. So maybe you don't have VPN access, but you did find some valid credentials on Outlook. There's a little tool called Ruler we use that will get us shells through a trick in Outlook. A few tricks actually, but they keep trying to patch them, unfortunately, but there's new ones coming out. Ruler starts up, it supports a bunch of different versions of Exchange and Office 365, and there was a point where Microsoft kind of touted like, well, you can separate Office 365 from your AD accounts, and that's fine because they're going to be different creds. So like maybe I got your Office 365 user and password, but I don't have their AD creds. Well, if I can still shell their machine, then I can still get their AD creds. What this does, it takes advantage of like weird Windows quirks where if you look at the properties file on your inbox in Outlook, so this is the desktop application Outlook, you launch this thing. If you look at the properties, for some reason there's a home page of your Outlook inbox. This has been patched. If you push the patch, there is one that will get rid of this inbox thing. And there's been a couple other Ruler rules that have been took advantage of forms. But essentially what the inbox does is create a local kind of server that runs a web page to kind of give you like the view of like welcome to Outlook, that kind of stuff in. But I can set that address to be any external URL. And so I can host something on like GitHub and just some little bit of script content that uses ActiveX and then like, you know, kind of run at server level code here. But their example in Ruler just launches Notepad, but you basically would replace that command run to your PowerShell, reverse shell, or whatever you're looking for. And so now the next time that person opens their Outlook and looks at it, this will automatically run in the background, not get detected by anything, like it's a part of Outlook then. And so even if I had just your O365 creds, I can now shell your computer as that user, because I'm actually going to come in from your AD creds to my box as the shell. And it's that simple, amazingly enough. And the attack, I mean, that's like just running the actual command. You know, you give it the email, the user. It does a few different tricks that have been patched and currently, but I think the Outlook homepage one was just recently, like, I know they came out with it in October. I don't know exactly when it got patched, but it's been fairly recent, and we still find this even like currently. I will say, like, they do have a version since post, the good guys, they have the not ruler, which you can run on your own company to see if you are vulnerable to any of the things it takes advantage of. And those, like, yeah, those are the patches. But the main point of that was, like, if you enable two-factor on your Outlook external-facing site, it pretty much stops all of that attack. Like, I might know that I have valid creds, but that redirect is going to take me to your two-factor, like, give me your PIN code page. And so even if I have real creds, unless I can find a unprotected Citrix endpoint or somewhere else I can log in that doesn't have two-factor, then I might be able to log in, but two-factor really stops a lot of what attackers do, at least the easy way. Like, there is crazy ways you can hack, I think, like SS7 and get people's messages or something, but we're not trying that, and unless you're getting targeted by like some nation state, that's probably not happening either. But two-factor is going to prevent most of what's going on here. I didn't cover everything. Clearly there's a lot more to external pen tests. These are just like these super easy steps that take very little, like, I don't need special scanners, I don't need to go, it's easy enough to Google dork for someone's VPN pages and things like that. So we didn't cover like the discovery of the endpoints. The IP domain reputation, I think they talked a little bit about in the phishing talk too, but that's easy enough when you can just go buy an expired, there's a website, expired domains like .net, where you can just go look at domains that just recently expired. You can buy those, point them to your redirectors, and then you've got redirectors that have already been categorized and will pass most of those like spam filters and things. The actual payload generation, I didn't cover in this one either, and then there's some obfuscation techniques. Surprisingly, most of the generic Empire and such payloads get right through most AV, especially when they're launched as your user. And the gathering the public breach data dumps, like we use like Pasteman Pro, and then pretty much just whenever we see the news of a dump, kind of go start looking. Like you can find these dumps relatively easy. And then just us compiling them all into one just made it a little easier to search through. And then also like another way in that's fairly simple is the default cred on management interfaces. There's not really a reason probably to expose any of your management interfaces to the internet, but when you leave the default creds on, everyone worries about all those like crazy exploits, but then they just don't change default creds. And yeah, even on the inside of your network, like, so now that I've got in through my VPN and I've got valid user creds, well, a lot of people were like, well, it's the internal network, we can leave default creds on, but if a malicious user is going after those default creds, they still don't have to use an exploit to compromise more machines. So even on the inside, you should be changing default creds always. And a bunch more clearly from the outside, but just in this talk. And like, people think like, oh, that's not like super elite exploit stuff, but we don't really need to use exploits a lot of times. We're really just looking for misconfigurations and weak users. And then like, would any of the tools you maybe have in place that protect against a bunch of antivirus stuff detected any of this? Probably not, because it's just a user coming in from the internet. Like, unless you're like IP restricting your employees to like their houses, you probably let them log in from anywhere on your VPN, and so they can just jump right in and they're on your network. There was a quote, I wish I could attribute to actually who it was, but they said like, most people and vendors worry about 0 days, but forget about the 3,374 days. That was actually the date that MS 08065 was released. And it's true, because like 08065 is still gone. I mean, rarely we will see it. Like in the last year, I definitely had it on a test. But like, I guess MS10, the newer ones, like they're gonna be there, and people just think because they're on the inside, our users would never attack us. Well, maybe not your actual users, but someone that has your users' credentials might attack you through those things. So for the roadmap of this series, we kind of, the part one's got the high-level overview and flow. Part two was some of this infrastructure and initial footholds. The next time, now that I've kind of, some people are like, well, how do you even get those first creds? Well, it's not that hard. We've seen, and I promise you, if you try that, we get in quite often with those techniques. But we'll start with the internal recon. So now we've got creds, we're inside the network. Now how do we get to like take over the whole domain? Then we'll go over like the identifying attack paths. I know in the first one I covered a little bit of Bloodhound and how just like, it's amazing how much Windows gives up to just domain unprivileged level users to find out about the rest of the domain just because of how it works. Part four will be like the different techniques to like the actual lateral movement and taking over the whole domain itself. And then part five, I kind of was going to leave it open. I was looking for some feedback on, do we want like post X? There's a lot of tools that can automate once we get inside, where I can just push a button and it'll do all my attack paths. And then we can also cover more important things for companies about like exfiltration and staying quiet. Like there's different ways you can package up data. So I've seen tools that even look for like credit card numbers leaving their network to try to protect their databases, but it's fairly simple to box all that stuff up and using like some kind of crypto to even base64 encoding it sometimes and then transporting it out is simple enough. We can go to avoiding detection, and then some of the persistence where you can just, once they're in, they can make it really, really hard to get rid of them. So that's kind of the roadmap. And then, if anyone has any questions, I'll answer those now. Yeah, that's the talk. Thanks.
Federation set up for single sign-on through Office 365. Have you been able to kind of compromise the Office 365 environment?
Yeah, so like with that Office 365 and that ruler attack, basically, like, yeah, I mean, using Office 365, that's all. I mean, that's what ruler was like designed for, was attacking that, like where it thought it was just protecting you because you just had webmail, but any of the changes I make on that webmail inbox affect your Outlook app inbox. So yeah, like that's the kind of how that works. But I mean, it was patched, and I just, you know, you push those patches out and make sure they're there, and make sure you don't have that home page available. And that's where the not ruler you can run and kind of double check to make sure you're protected. Anything else? All right. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much. Hey, let's have a quick round of applause for Ryan here. Let's give it up for him.